adult, and looking from my perspective, a very young adult. But after school, when she finished school, she did her training as teaching, and she was teaching in remote Queensland and Northern Territory. But then she changed directions, and she worked for the anti-human trafficking organisation for 11 years in Myanmar and also China. She managed the social enterprise arm of the organisation, which was an international jewellery company. And then she also ran art therapy and vocational training program in jewellery making for survivors of slavery. But now Kate is in the Queensland team, is a Queensland team leader of the Freedom Hub, and she manages the Survivor School and the awareness teams across Queensland. And that's a rundown of her life. But I've got also another perspective of Kate, and I've known her family. And I think our heritage also, it doesn't make us, but it's part of us, an important part of us. And I worked with Kate's grandmother many moons ago. Well, not that many, but a fair few. And her name was Jane. And she was a storyteller. And I remember one day she came into work. She had always had interesting stories. She came into work sort of chuckling, and she said, we had a knock at the door. And she opened the door, and there was this lady standing there, and she welcomed her in, and they sat down, and Jane and her husband Neville, they sat down and gave this woman tea and scones. Jane was famous for her cheese scones. And they talked, and then this lady went. And Jane and Neville looked at each other and said, who was she? It was sort of a family joke. That's Colleen's interpretation. It was a family joke for a while. But it was characteristic of this family, of Kate's grandparents and her parents and her extended family. There is a welcoming there to anybody and everybody. They welcome the stranger, they welcome the refugee, they welcome the disadvantaged, and they welcome the hurting. They were a remarkable family. And they didn't immediately judge people. They were wise. Don't always just invite strangers in. They were wise, and yet they were welcoming. And this is the heritage that Kate's grown up with. And Kate's made her own choices, but as we can see from what she has done in her life so far, she's reaching out to people. And this morning it's about how can we be more aware to reach out to people. Thanks, Kate. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Thanks, Colleen. Love my grandma. Oh, bit teary, really. All right, I'm so happy to be with you all today. Thank you so much for this church family for just embracing the Freedom Hub and the things that you've done to support us so far. It's really, really exciting. And I'm really excited to share a little bit more with you today. So if we can see if we can, I don't know if this is all going to work. Technology doesn't love me. I don't know. Oh, look at this. Do I have the power? Possibly not. No. No? Oh, there we go. Maybe that's me, maybe that's them, I'm not sure. But I think as we begin, I think the first thing we need to discuss, so the Freedom Hub deals with modern day slavery. But as we talk about this, often people think, well, slavery, like you cast your mind back to slave ships and people in chains and you think, oh, slavery doesn't really exist today. So as we begin, I think it's important to acknowledge that actually slavery is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world, and that there are more slaves today than ever before. So this is just a little bit of a snapshot. Please frame this with a COVID lens. They estimate now that there's another 10 million people that have been forced into slavery because of COVID and the effects that COVID has. And we also estimate that there's around 50,000 in Australia, not 15, because they recognise that 1 in 5 people are not identified as victims of slavery here in Australia. And this is an overwhelming figure. I've worked in this industry for a really long time, and I've got a personal faith, and that's really, really helped me, because Jesus helps things not become so overwhelming, I think. So as we talk about this, here's just another little glimpse of what COVID did in our world. It affected us not very much here in Queensland. We were quite blessed, but across the world, this is what's happened. And when we're talking about slavery, you need to remember that 736 million people live below the poverty line, and that's $2.60 a day. And if you're below the poverty line and something happens, you're willing to make choices, or you are willing to believe things that possibly aren't the safest things, and you end up in risky situations, trafficked into forced labour and things like that. And so, as I feel like everyone stole off all of my verses this morning, and already had great talks about what light is, but this is a verse that has stayed with me for a really long time. Talking a little bit about my personal faith, the Freedom Hub is a non-religious organisation. We work with people of all faiths, all religions, all are welcome. But I want to talk to you a bit about my personal faith and how that's helped me to maintain the work that I do. This is a verse that's been an amazing reminder for me for the last 12 years. When we go out into the community, and when we go out, when I was in Asia, we would go out into the trafficking hubs. This is a picture of one of the areas that we would go to. Each week when I was there, we would do HIV support work, and we would go in and we would be invited in by the bosses. Everybody would invite us in because we were providing assistance. We would do HIV rapid tests for people and then help them to get the support that they needed. And so one of the bosses, one of the days, was like, oh, there's another place that we'd like you to come and help, because there's a boss there that would like a test. So we went with him through these 3 boom gates, up 3 locked staircases into this room that was like a toilet, they're like toilet cubicles, and there was an underage girl inside each of those cubicles working. And they'd all been trafficked into that situation for less than $100. And so we were able to give testing to the boss, but also to the women inside. And I remember telling them, we'd tell them about, if you can get out, we'd have a little private time, because the bosses would let us, because it was HIV testing. And so we would teach them, if you can get out, this is how you call us. We'd give them a little card, we'd stick it underneath the hem of their clothes, and we'd say, if you can get out, call us, we will come, we will meet you wherever you are, we will help you with all kinds of supports, we'll come around you and journey with you to support you and your family, because that's usually why they were there, to support their families. But I remember leaving and being like, oh my goodness, God, how are they going to get out? Like, even if they get out, there's like 3 locked doors, and then there's like, it was just, it seemed impossible. And because it was underage, we're like, oh, we could call the police. They are corrupt, but we could call the police. Maybe we could do something, but there was 3 boom gates, so people would be warned before they got there, and it would be empty. And I remember the next morning chatting with one of my work colleagues and just feeling really disheartened. And I remember crying out the night before to God. I'm like, we're not doing enough. Like, this isn't enough. Like, I know we're going in and we're giving hope and we're saying we will support you if you come out. But I'm like, they can't get out. And then I heard this knock at the door, and there was 2 girls at the door that I'd met the night before. And I was just mind blown. And I'm like, what are you doing here? And they're like, well, you told us that there was hope. And you told us that we could dream again. And we found a window that was open, and it shouldn't have been open. And it was open, and we climbed out, and we're here. And I just lost it. I was like, oh my goodness. And I think as we're talking about this topic, I think it's this overwhelming topic where you go, God, like, this is too big. Like, it's too horrible. And God says, if you go in and you shine light, I open windows. And so as we're talking about this, I just want you to sort of keep that in the back of your mind, that God opens windows. So these are the things that I reflect on. When I'm doing this work, hearing this despair each day, I think I have to remind myself to fix my eyes on His hope and His love. And I immerse myself in that. And I know that carrying hope, it's not just a false thing that it has hands and it has feet. And the reason those girls climbed out that window is because we said, we will support you, we will journey with you, we will help you with with education, we will help you with accommodation, we will help you with vocational training. Like, we will be alongside you to help you with these things. And it needs hands and feet. They wouldn't have climbed out the window otherwise. Carrying light doesn't deny reality. I didn't go in there and deny the reality of the situation. Like, we were bound. Like, I couldn't do anything for those girls other than say, you have a hope and you have a future. And that's what God called me to do, and that's what opened that window to get them out. So all of this might seem a little bit removed from Brisbane, but actually it's kind of not. So when I came back, it broke my heart that slavery's happening here in Australia. It shouldn't. We are the land of the free. Like, what is slavery doing here? We have all the things in our country that should make sure that slavery doesn't exist here, and it does. And so our founder, she's Christian as well, but our organisation isn't, but she saw a need in her community. She saw this, that there was people experiencing slavery as well, and she thought, I can do something about that. So they started selling clothes at the second-hand market down in Glebe in Sydney, and the money that they raised, they supported some people that they knew in the community that had been survivors of slavery, and they started a really small survivor school. And that was the beginning. Now we're in 4 states. We have over 50 people working for us, mainly volunteers. And before COVID, we were 60% self-funded, and we have in that year just before COVID, had reached 25,000 people around Australia about what slavery is and what we can do about it. We have over 85 survivors in our care currently. So this is our mission. We aim to end slavery in Australia. We want to partner with people so that they can rebuild their lives, and we are partnering in the fight to end global slavery with all of you around the world. And we want everyone to be able to do something about that. So people like Colleen and Kat, who decided to host a high tea. I don't know if any of you guys went to that, but that high tea was a chance for them to share with you about how survivors are rebuilding their lives here in Australia. Survivors like Jess. So Jess was one of the ladies that are in our courses. She came to Australia to become a lawyer. She was working and she got a part-time job. That part-time job turned into a forced labour situation with a false debt that was given to her, and she was forced to be working 16 hours a day without breaks, and physical and sexual abuse also followed. And what I want to start talking to you about is how we can change that in our country. So, what is slavery? Slavery is defined as identified as an element of ownership or control over another person's life, a coercion and a restriction of movement, and this is the really important part, the fact that someone is not free to leave. So there's exploitation, but in exploitation you can leave. You can be exploited, but you can leave. In slavery, you don't have the ability to leave a situation. It occurs in all forms. Here's the list of, this is the Australian law defining slavery that came out not that long ago. So it's all forms, and it can be people that they know trick them into slavery situations. It can be work that agent tricks them and they end up in a place where the pay that they're given has so many deductions and so many other things put on that pay that by the time they've finished their workday, they don't have any money left. A lot of the time when you're looking at forced labour, that's the case. You're promised something when you come over to Australia, and then there's a charge for accommodation, there's a charge for this, there's a charge for that, there's a charge for this, and by the end of it, you're left with a debt. And you're not free to leave because perhaps your passport's been taken and a number of other things have been taken from you. And so as we're talking about this, you've got Susan up here. She was working as a cleaner. She would be bussed into buildings in the city here in Australia, be bussed into buildings, clean all night, and then be bussed out and locked in a room with 8 other women during the day. We can't view this as statistics. We can't view this as just numbers. We need to view the Modern Day Slavery Act in Australia as women and children and men that are living in this abuse, and we need to be able to do something about it. Also, slavery is a $150 billion industry. So I think that's a really important thing to sort of log into your brain. So what does that have to do with me here in Australia? I think this is important. And there's a lot of really important things to take away. If anything you take away, this: 2/3 of the world's slaves, 25 million people, the entire population of Australia is caught in slavery in the Asia Pacific region. That's our home. That's our shopping ground. That's the places that we have the most impact on, and that's where the most slaves are living. That's not okay. So it's our opportunity as well, I think, and that's the lens, the light lens that we like to look through it, which is we have such an ability to make a change because this is in our backyard, so we can clean this up. I'm just gonna hope this video works. Can you make it work up the back there, or do I press it here? How does it work? Oh, there we go. There should be sound. No, maybe not. We can just keep going if there's no sound. Don't worry about it, it's fine. I'll just keep going. So that was a story about Sandra, who was one of our survivors, who was a domestic care. She came over to work in a house as a domestic worker, and was locked in the house for many, many years, and was forced to do all kinds of things, wasn't allowed out without supervision, and a next door neighbour noticed and reported, and then a social worker was able to come and identify that she was a victim of slavery. And she's now gone through our program. We've supported her with educational services. And she's now an aged care worker. She lives by herself. She's got her driver's license, and she's got an independent life here in Australia. So that's the Spark Notes version of that video. So just to give you a little bit of a look, the law came in 2014 about slavery here in Australia. And as you can see, the cases have then started to increase because we now know what slavery looks like and how to identify it. The main areas of slavery in Australia, you can see on the graph here. In Queensland, it's forced marriage and it's forced labour. They are the two major ones that we have here. I mean, we have all of them, but they're the two major ones that we have. But I think this is the most important thing. Those other statistics are quite small in number. This is the first 2 months of the year, which gives you a bit more of an understanding about what's actually happening. That's a lot of people. There was 4 women, 17 to 24 years old, found in Mount Gravatt in a very fancy house, and they were locked in slavery, Australian women, in sexual exploitation. There was 30 men in a $1 million mansion in Morningside, being forced labour, doing call centres. It's happening in our backyard. And so I think it's something that we need to be really aware of. So, how do I know if modern day slavery is occurring? It can be identified in a number of different ways, but here it's happening in plain sight. If there's simple things that you can start to look for, I think that's what we need to know to be able to sort of identify it. So these are some of the things that you can look for to see if slavery is happening. Often on farms, there's lots of it happening out in the farming industries in Queensland. You've got Woolworths and Coles. There's a modern day slavery act where now companies have to investigate the slavery in their supply chain. So that's a really positive thing that Australia is doing to start to address those issues around forced labour in our country. But here's some that are important. So excess work, little or no money, passports being taken away, living in group accommodation, unsafe, signs of injuries, someone being with them at all times in the community, they're not left unsupervised. These are signs. It doesn't mean that they're in slavery, but these are some very, if you get a number of these, it's clear indicators that possibly something's happening that's a little bit dodgy. So I think as I tell you that, when we're looking at slavery, the main thing to look at is to make sure that the person is safe. So you don't want to ever do anything that would make that person unsafe. So when you're looking, if you do identify slavery in the community or think that you do, you can always call us. We've got a hotline up the back. You can call us. If it's an emergency, please call 000. You can also call the Australian Federal Police who deal with this. But you're always making sure that the people are still safe. You don't want to put them in a position where then that their controller then recognises that maybe they're trying to leave or something like that, you want to make sure that they're still safe. So just quickly, this is the one I was talking about. There's 4 women. This is in the last 2 years in Australia. So you've got 70 people in a farm in Tasmania. You've got 4 people here in Brisbane. You've got Sydney having people in the domestic, in the cleaning industry. And then you've got Queensland having essentially a servant that they've imported from Fiji and then was working in their home for 7 years. So it's not all bad. As I was saying, there's the Modern Day Slavery Act, and there's people like you who want to do something about this issue. So we've got to go a bit fast because we're talking too much. But this is what we do. So we have a survivor school that supports people, comes alongside them and journeys with them from whatever they need, and we create an education plan to get them to becoming sort of independent members of community. If they are from overseas, we have supports where they might need English support. They might not even know what Australian money is because they have never had it. So we might teach them what money is, how to catch a bus, how to buy an ice cream, really important things, how to go to the doctor, all of these kinds of things, all the way up to how to apply for jobs. We do job support, and then we work with businesses that have done their modern day slavery statements and says, we don't want slavery in our companies. We work with those companies and we help place people in supported work experience, and then we help them to get jobs. And then it comes back around, they have a baby, they come back into our mums groups. It's just a circle of greatness that happens in our survivor school. The rest of the things you can come and talk to me about afterwards, but we do have some ethical goods up the back, great coffee, great candles, all of that goes back towards supporting our survivors in our school. We also have ethical business where we talk to businesses and we help businesses to support ending slavery within their communities through their supply chain. So if you've got a business or know people that would be interested, also please come and talk to me. So we've got regional local teams, and Colleen and Kat, I think, are championing that here in this church. And there's numbers of different ways that you can get involved, and I'm sure you can talk to them as well as to me. But they're running little events, and we had a film night here a few weeks ago, raising awareness and things like that. So yeah, please talk to any of us if you're interested in getting involved. And then, I guess this is just the final part. What's your response? Because there's a number of different things you can do. I think that verse is just one that comes all the time for me, that you have an ability to speak up. You are free, and you have that voice that enables freedom to be given to other people. And so within that, the first action you can do is you can raise that awareness in your community. You can talk to your community. You can tell them about slavery. You can follow us on our socials and share news stories on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and things like that. We have a clothing swap that we're having at another church up at Carina, so you can come and join us with a clothing swap where we're going to be talking about ethical clothing and how to sort of decrease slavery in the clothes industry. It's on the 8th of October, so I can tell you more about that if you're interested in coming. But I think the second thing you can do is recognise that you have purchasing power. So you have an amazing ability to change what's happening in Australia with your purchasing power. So you can choose to shop at this shop instead of at that shop. And there's lots of apps that show you how ethical different stores are. So there's you can look at David Jones and Myer. David Jones has a better ethical rating than Myer. Kmart has a better ethical rating than Best and Less. So you can start to sort of say, well, I'm going to shop here and I'm not going to shop there because they have slavery in their supply chains. These guys do too, but they're taking steps towards fixing it. You can buy slavery-free coffee at the back, so you know when you're sipping your latte that there isn't a child collecting coffee beans instead of being at school. Simple things you can do. The other thing that you can do is you can look at your superannuation. You can invest in superannuation that doesn't invest in slavery, and there's ways that you can look at online to do that, and that's a free thing that you can do where your money is just ticking away, not helping slavery. The third thing is that we offer this long-term wraparound support to survivors. And we're a privately funded social enterprise, and we have businesses and individuals that support us. And so feel free to partner with us if that's something that's on your heart. But also, any businesses that you know of that would be interested in learning more about ending slavery, hairdressers, all the way up to big corporates, all of those have such a powerful ability to end slavery in their communities. And then with those, we help to place people in education programs. So Jess now is placed in one of our partners' education, one of our business partners' firms, and she's a law assistant now. And so she's gone from experiencing slavery in Australia to now nearly at the point where she's doing her law exams. And so that's a really exciting thing to be able to be a part of. So I do believe that Australia can be the first country that doesn't have slavery. We have all the laws in place, and we have this powerful reach to make this impact that we need. So tell your friends that it's happening, please. People don't know what's happening here, and it's unacceptable. This is like the fair go country. There shouldn't be one person here that's experiencing slavery. If you work somewhere, talk to them about how they're ending slavery, and then talk to us. If you want to volunteer with us, if you want to run an event or anything like that, talk to us and see what we can do. So yeah, that's our contact details, and that's all. So I just really, really like to thank you for coming, and I just want to close in prayer, if that's all right. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for the light of all of these people here in front of us. Lord, their hearts and their desire to see the world as you see it, Lord, a world that should not have slavery. God, and so I just pray that you would give us opportunities in our week and in our days, that we can raise this awareness, that we can share your heart for a world that's free from slavery. Lord, I just pray that you would give opportunities to share and give opportunities to create a difference, Lord. Thank you that you've invited us to be part of your plan to bring freedom. In Jesus'